Just take it, my stepmother whispered, her wine-soaked breath hitting my face as she slammed my shoulder against the laundry room cabinets. She shoved the transfer papers into my hands, punctuating the demand with another slap. Outside, my father toasted to a silent night, oblivious to the blood pooling in my mouth. I prepared to surrender like always, until the garage door behind her clicked open, bringing a rush of freezing air and a witness she never expected. My name is Clara Whitmore, and at 32 years old, I was the Chief Technology Officer of Sentinel Gate Cyber Defense, a woman responsible for securing the digital assets of Fortune 500 companies against state-sponsored hackers and criminal syndicates. Yet, in that frozen, suspended moment on Christmas Eve, none of my accolades or seven-figure salary mattered. I was just a body being shoved against a washing machine, tasting the metallic tang of my own blood. The laundry room of my father's sprawling estate in the suburbs of Denver was a world away from the warmth of the rest of the house. Out there, beyond the heavy oak door that separated the utility space from the kitchen, Bing Crosby was crooning about a white Christmas. Out there, the air smelled of roasting rosemary lamb, pine needles, and expensive cinnamon candles. In here, it smelled of bleach, cold tile, and the sour, fruity stench of the Pinot Noir on my stepmother's breath. Nora Whitmore had always possessed a terrifying kind of strength in her hands, a grip that belied her slender, manicured appearance. She slammed my shoulder against the upper cabinets again, the wood groaning under the impact. The vibration rattled my teeth. My head snapped back, and I felt the sharp sting of her diamond ring catching the corner of my lip. It was a sensation I had cataloged hundreds of times since I was 12. A physical trigger that usually sent my brain into a shutdown mode, a survival instinct to go limp and silent. "Just take it," Nora whispered. It was never a scream. That was the genius of Nora Whitmore. She never raised her voice above a hiss, ensuring that to anyone listening on the other side of the door, our conversation would sound like nothing more than an intense, perhaps private, exchange of maternal advice. She shoved a sheaf of papers into my chest, forcing my fingers to curl around them reflexively. I looked down, my vision blurring slightly from the impact, even through the haze of pain. The bold headings were unmistakable. It was a stock transfer agreement and a durable power of attorney, granting control over my personal investment portfolio, the one I had built independently of the family trust, to Thomas and Nora Whitmore. "Sign it, Clara," she hissed, her face inches from mine. Her skin was flawless, smoothed by Botox and the finest dermatologist Denver could offer, but her eyes were manic, two hard points of blue flint. "Sign it and keep your mouth shut like you always do. Don't ruin tonight. Don't you dare make a scene when we have guests." I tried to regain my footing, my heels slipping on the polished linoleum. The stark blue-white light of the overhead fluorescent strip hummed aggressively, casting harsh shadows that deepened the hollows of Nora's face, making her look skeletal, predatory. It was a violent contrast to the soft, golden ambrosia of light spilling through the crack in the doorframe leading to the kitchen. Through that sliver of space, I could see them. I could see the great room, with its cathedral ceilings, and the 20-foot spruce tree that touched the rafters, draped in thousands of twinkling fairy lights. I saw the back of my father's head. Thomas Whitmore was wearing his favorite velvet smoking jacket, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch aloft as he laughed at a joke made by one of his golf partners. He looked distinguished. He looked like the perfect patriarch. He was less than 50 feet away from where his wife was currently assaulting his daughter. Yet he might as well have been on the moon. He knew, deep down, in the places where men hide the truths they are too cowardly to face. Thomas Whitmore knew. He simply chose the music and the scotch over the reality of the laundry room. "Are you listening to me?" Nora emphasized the question with a sharp backhand slap across my cheek. The sound was wet and loud in the small room, but the spin cycle of the washing machine next to us covered it perfectly. I tasted copper again. I swallowed it, feeling the thick, warm liquid slide down my throat. My brain, usually a fortress of logic and analytical precision, was fighting to override the trembling in my hands. This was the dichotomy of my existence. I could hunt down a Russian botnet in 3 hours. I could stand before a board of directors and demand a $10 million budget increase without blinking. But here, in this house, under the smell of this specific laundry detergent, I was reduced to a frightened child. "I said take it," she repeated, grabbing my chin and forcing me to look at her. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we did for you, you think you can just come here in your designer dress, looking down on us, and say no? We need this liquidity. Clara, it is just a bridge loan. You get it back in 6 months." 6 months. It was always 6 months. Just like the $20,000 for the roof repair that never happened. Just like the $50,000 for Ethan's car insurance after his second DUI. Just like the $300,000 for the restaurant investment that evaporated into thin air. I looked at the papers crumpled in my fist. The text was dense. Legal jargon designed to strip me of the assets I had accrued from my stock options at Sentinel Gate. They wanted the liquidity. They wanted the safety net I had spent 10 years weaving so that I would never have to depend on them again. Nora shook me, her nails digging into the soft flesh of my upper arms. "If you don't sign this, Clara, I swear to God, I will turn this entire family against you. I will tell them you cut us off. I will tell your father you're trying to bankrupt us out of spite. You know he'll believe me. He always believes me." She was right. He always did. Because believing her was easier than defending me. But tonight was different. I took a slow breath, inhaling the chemical scent of bleach. I felt the throb in my lip, a rhythmic pulse of pain that sharpened my focus rather than dulling it. I looked at the papers, then lifted my eyes to meet hers. For the first time in 2 decades, I did not lower my gaze. I did not flinch. I was the CTO of Sentinel Gate. I dealt with extortionists for a living. I dealt with people who thought they could hold data hostage for ransom. I knew that you never paid the ransom, because once you paid, they never stopped coming back for more. "No," I said. The word hung in the cold air, heavier than the winter storm raging outside the frosted window. Nora blinked, as if I had spoken in a language she did not understand. She froze, her grip on my arms loosening slightly in sheer shock. "What did you say?" My voice was quiet, steady, stripped of the trembling that rattled my bones. I said no. "Nora, I am not signing these, and I am not covering the debt for the chalet. Not this year, not ever again." The transformation in her face was instantaneous, the mask of the concerned. Stressed mother fell away, revealing pure, unadulterated rage. Her lips peeled back from her teeth. "You think you have a choice? You think you are special because you made a little money? You are nothing without this family. You are a cold, unlovable spinster who thinks her bank account is a substitute for a personality." "I am not paying," I repeated, louder this time. I felt a strange calm settling over me, a cold clarity that felt like the code scrolling down my monitor during a breach analysis. I was no longer the victim. I was the firewall. Nora let out a strangled sound of fury. She grabbed a heavy plastic bottle of detergent from the counter and raised it, clearly intending to strike me with something harder than her hand. "You ungrateful bitch. I will beat some respect into you if it is the last thing I do." "Do it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a challenge that confused her. I didn't cower. I didn't raise my arms to block the blow. I just stared at her, my eyes locking onto hers with a terrifying calmness. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, unnerved by my lack of fear, but the rage was already in motion. Her arm swung back, the heavy bottle poised to crash down on my skull. It was a tableau of domestic violence frozen in time. The stepmother, the weapon, the bloodied daughter, and the indifferent party just beyond the wall. And then, the sound of gears grinding shattered the moment. The heavy, fire-rated door behind Nora, the one that led out to the 3-car garage, clicked loudly. The automatic lock disengaged with a metallic thud that echoed in the small room. Nora froze, her arms still raised in mid-strike, her eyes widening in panic. We both turned our heads. The door swung inward. A blast of freezing December air rushed into the laundry room, carrying snowflakes that danced in the fluorescent light. The sudden drop in temperature was shocking, instantly biting into exposed skin. But it wasn't just the cold that entered the room. Standing in the threshold, framed by the darkness of the garage and the headlights of a car that had pulled in silently, was a figure. They were dressed in a heavy wool coat dusted with fresh snow, standing tall and imposing against the winter night. The person stepped fully into the light of the laundry room, their eyes sweeping over the scene with the precision of a camera lens. They looked at Nora's raised arm holding the weapon. They looked at the papers crumpled in my hand. They looked at the blood trickling from the corner of my mouth and staining the collar of my silk blouse. Nora's arm dropped to her side as if the strings had been cut. Her mouth opened to form a lie, the excuses already queuing up on her tongue, but the look on the intruder's face stopped her dead. The silence that followed was louder than the party, louder than the storm. It was the silence of a secret being ripped open under the harsh glare of a neon light. That phrase, "Just take it," echoed in my skull, bouncing off the tiled walls of the laundry room, but it did not originate there. It was a ghost, a recurring incantation that had haunted the last decade of my life. As the cold air from the open door bit into my skin, my mind did not stay in the violent present. Instead, it was dragged backward, pulled by the gravity of 1,000 similar moments, sifting through the archaeology of my exploitation. I remembered the ghosts of Christmases past. To the outside observer, the Whitmore family holidays were a spectacle of upper-middle-class perfection. We had the tallest tree in the neighborhood, imported from a sustainable farm in Oregon. We had the sprawling dinner parties where the wine flowed like water and the roast beef was always cooked to a perfect medium rare. But for years, I had been the invisible engine keeping that machine running. I was the one who paid the caterers when my father's card was declined. I was the one who covered the cost of the vintage ornaments Nora insisted were essential for her aesthetic. I was the silent partner in my own family's happiness, purchasing their joy with checks signed in the dark, while my name was conveniently forgotten when the toasts were made. It had not always been this way. My childhood, before the cancer took my mother, had been modest but honest. We lived in a smaller house, drove used cars, and gifts were small things wrapped in newspaper comics. When my mother died, the light went out of the house, and my father, Thomas, was a man who could not survive in the dark. He needed a sun to orbit, and he found a blinding one in Nora. Nora entered our lives like an erratic comet, dazzling, sophisticated, and carrying an air of curated perfection. She was a woman who knew exactly how to drape a cashmere shawl and how to make a man feel like a king even when his kingdom was crumbling. She rebuilt my father, and for that, I had loved her once, or at least, I had tried to. But with Nora came Ethan, her son from a previous marriage. A boy 3 years younger than me with a smile that could charm the birds out of the trees and a work ethic that was non-existent. The dynamic was established early. I was the pragmatic one, the worker bee. I attended a state university on an academic scholarship, working double shifts at a campus coffee shop to pay for my textbooks and rent. I drove a 10-year-old sedan that rattled when it hit 60 miles per hour. Meanwhile, Ethan was the golden child, the dreamer. He was sent to a private liberal arts college that cost $50,000 a year. A tuition my father could barely afford but paid without complaint because Nora insisted that Ethan needed the right network. When I made the dean's list, I got a nod. When Ethan managed to pass a semester without getting on academic probation, they threw a dinner party. Things shifted when I landed my position at Sentinel Gate. Suddenly, the quiet, bookish stepdaughter was a rising star in the tech world. My salary jumped from entry-level to executive brackets in the span of 5 years, and that was when Nora's affection underwent a terrifying mutation. I remembered the first time. It was a Tuesday, 7 years ago. I had just been promoted to lead security analyst. Nora had invited me over for tea, a rare occurrence. She sat me down in the sunroom, poured me a cup of Earl Grey, and told me how proud she was. "You are so brilliant, Clara," she had said, her eyes shining with tears that looked genuine. This family is so lucky to have you. Your father and I, we are just so relieved you are doing well." Then came the pivot. It was subtle, masterful. She sighed, looking out the window at the overgrown garden. She mentioned a cash flow problem, a misunderstanding with the bank, a temporary freeze on Thomas's accounts due to an identity theft scare, a lie I would later realize was pathetically easy to debunk. But at 25, I was desperate for her approval. "It is just $10,000, sweetheart," she had whispered, touching my hand. "Just to cover the mortgage and the credit cards until the bank sorts it out next week. Just take the bill, pay it, and we will reimburse you immediately." I paid it. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to be the daughter who could fix things. They never reimbursed me. When I asked about it a month later, Nora laughed it off, saying the bank was still being difficult, and then she deftly changed the subject to how handsome Ethan looked in his new suit, a suit I realized, with a sinking stomach, had likely been bought with the money I had given them for the mortgage. That was the breach in the dam. Over the years, the requests became demands, and the demands became emotional hostage situations. I remembered the roof. It was 3 years ago. During a heavy storm season, Nora called me at 2 a.m, sobbing hysterically. Water was pouring into the master bedroom, ruining the hardwood floors, ruining the antique rugs. The insurance had lapsed, an oversight by my father. They needed $25,000 for an emergency contractor, or the house would be condemned. "Just take it, Clara," she had pleaded through the phone. "Help your father. The stress will kill him. Do you want him to have a heart attack? You are the only one we can rely on." I paid the contractor directly. I told myself it was for the house, for the asset that would one day be my inheritance. I did not know then that the house had already been leveraged to the hilt. Then there was Ethan's bistro. That was the most expensive lesson of my life. Ethan had decided he was a restaurateur. He wanted to open a high-concept fusion bar in downtown Denver. He needed seed money. Nora and Thomas pitched it to me not as a gift, but as an investment. "You will be a silent partner," Thomas had said, looking me in the eye with a sincerity that made my chest ache. 40% equity. Ethan has a solid business plan. This is his chance to launch. Clara, if you do not help him, who will? I put in $150,000. It was the bulk of my savings at the time. I signed the checks, and Nora hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe, whispering that I was the glue holding the family together. The bistro, named Velocity, lasted 8 months. Ethan treated it like his personal clubhouse, comping drinks for his friends, ignoring the suppliers, and partying until dawn. When it folded, the money vanished. There were no assets to liquidate, only debt, and when I brought it up at Thanksgiving, furious and hurt, Nora had looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and said, "Clara, why do you have to be so focused on money? Your brother is heartbroken. He tried his best. Why can't you just support him emotionally instead of keeping score?" I was the family bank, an ATM that dispensed cash in exchange for guilt. Every time I resolved to cut them off, the cocktail of emotions paralyzed me. There was the guilt of being successful while they struggled, even if their struggle was self-inflicted. There was the twisted gratitude I felt toward Nora for taking care of my father, and underneath it all, the burning memory of my biological mother, who had made me promise on her deathbed to always look after my father. "Take care of Thomas," she had whispered. "He is not strong like us." Nora weaponized that promise. She knew exactly which buttons to press to bypass my logic circuits. She knew that if she framed the request as saving the family image, I would cave. The amounts grew staggering. It wasn't just bills anymore. It was lifestyle maintenance. It was a new SUV because the old one was unsafe. It was a membership at the country club because business deals happen on the golf course. Gradually, the tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands. I stopped looking at the total. The number was a monster living in my spreadsheets, a figure so large it made me physically ill to acknowledge. I was drowning in their debt while swimming in my own success. The memory that burned the brightest, the one that finally cracked the foundation of my compliance, was last Christmas. We were in this same house. The tree was silver and blue that year. The air smelled of pine and expensive cologne. But in the kitchen, away from the guests, the atmosphere was funereal. Ethan had gotten involved with a loan shark. He hadn't called it that. Of course, he called it a private equity lender with aggressive terms. He owed $60,000, due by the 26th of December, or they were going to start breaking things. Not furniture. Bones. Nora was on her knees, literally on her knees on the kitchen floor, clutching the hem of my skirt. My father was sitting at the table, his head in his hands, weeping silently. "They will kill him, Clara." Nora had sobbed, her mascara running down her cheeks. "My baby. They will kill my boy. Please, I am begging you. This is the absolute last time. I swear on my life. I swear on your mother's grave. Just take this burden from us one last time, and we will never ask you for a cent again. We will sell the cabin. We will downsize. I promise." I looked at Ethan. He was pale, shaking, looking like a frightened child rather than a 30-year-old man. I looked at my father, broken and gray. I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling as I opened my banking app. I authorized the wire transfer. $60,000. It was the price of my brother's kneecaps. "Thank you," Nora had breathed, pulling herself up and wrapping her arms around me. She smelled of wine and desperation. "Thank you. My angel, you saved us. This is the last time. I promise." I believed her. Or maybe I just needed to believe her so I could sleep at night. But standing in the laundry room now, with the taste of blood in my mouth and a new set of papers demanding $1.5 million for a ski chalet, that promise rang in my ears like a death knell. The last time was a lie. It was always a lie. There was no bottom to their need, no ceiling to their greed. The flashback receded, snapping back like a rubber band, leaving me sharp and cold in the present moment. I looked at Nora, whose arm had dropped to her side at the sight of the intruder. I looked at the papers she wanted me to sign. I remembered the $60,000. I remembered the $150,000. I remembered the roof, the cars, the lies, and I realized that the woman standing before me didn't see a daughter. She saw a signature. She saw a resource to be mined until it was empty. But the mine had collapsed, and the person standing in the doorway was about to show Nora exactly what happens when you dig too deep. The timeline of a disaster is rarely a straight line. It is a spiral, tightening and accelerating until the collision is inevitable. If the laundry room on Christmas Eve was the point of impact, then the dinner 3 weeks prior was the moment the brakes officially failed. We were seated at La Lumière, the kind of French restaurant in downtown Denver where the menus have no prices and the waiters speak in a hush that suggests you are in a cathedral rather than a dining room. It was Nora's choice, naturally. She believed that difficult conversations went smoother when surrounded by crystal stemware and white truffle oil. The air smelled of browned butter and expensive perfume, a cloying richness that coated the back of my throat. The occasion was ostensibly to celebrate Ethan's 31st birthday, but the energy at the table was far too kinetic for a simple family gathering. Ethan was vibrating with a manic sort of enthusiasm, his eyes bright, his hands moving constantly as he swirled his Pinot Noir. He was wearing a new watch, a heavy chronograph that I knew cost more than my first car, and his suit was tailored to within an inch of its life. I sat opposite him, nursing a glass of sparkling water. I had learned long ago that drinking around my family was a tactical error. You needed sharp reflexes when dining with the Whitmores. "So," Ethan began, leaning forward as the waiter cleared the appetizer plates. "I have some news. Big news. I finally found it. The big one." Nora beamed, placing a hand on his forearm. Her nails were painted a deep, blood red. "Tell your sister, darling, she is going to be so impressed." "I am moving into luxury real estate development," Ethan announced, dropping the words like they were gold coins. "But not just flipping houses, high-end, exclusive experiential properties. I have secured an option on a chalet in the Rockies, Aspenside, but secluded. It is a $4 million property, easily. The previous owner is a tech guy who got liquidated in a lawsuit and needs to offload it immediately. I kept my face neutral, employing the same mask I used during hostile board meetings. Real estate, I repeated flatly. That is a pivot from the bistro and the crypto venture. Ethan waved his hand dismissively. Those were learning experiences. This is different. Clara, this is tangible. The land alone is worth 3. The structure is magnificent. Timber frame, floor-to-ceiling glass, heated driveway. I have a contractor lined up to do a cosmetic refresh, and we can flip it for $6 million by next season, or... He paused for dramatic effect, looking at Nora and Thomas. We keep it? A family retreat? A legacy property? Imagine Christmas there next year, Thomas said, his voice wistful. He looked at me, his eyes soft and pleading. Snow falling on the pines, a real fireplace, plenty of room for everyone. It would be something special. Clara, something for the family. I felt the trap snapping shut before they even finished the sentence. I took a sip of water. It sounds like a significant undertaking. How are you financing the purchase? Ethan's smile faltered for a microsecond before widening again. That is the best part, because it is a distressed sale. I can get it for a steal, but I need to move fast. The window closes in 48 hours. I have the lenders lined up for the renovation costs, but I need the down payment and the acquisition capital in cash to secure the deed. How much? I asked. $1.5 million, Ethan said. He said it quickly, as if saying it fast made the number smaller. $1.5 million. The silence that followed was heavy. The clinking of silverware from other tables seemed to fade away. I looked at the 3 of them. Nora, with her predatory anticipation. Thomas, with his weak, hopeful smile. Ethan, with his entitled arrogance. They weren't asking for a loan. They were presenting me with a bill. It is a bridge, really, Nora interjected smoothly, sensing the temperature drop. Just to secure the asset, once the renovation loan kicks in, or we refinance after the appraisal. You get your money back with interest. We were thinking, well, since you have done so well with your stock options this quarter, and the market is so volatile right now, putting that money into real estate is actually the safer play for you. We are doing this for you, really, to diversify your portfolio. For me, I said. My voice was dry. We are a family, Thomas added, reaching for his wine. We rise together. This chalet, it would be a shared asset. Your name would be on the title, of course. Along with yours, Nora's, and Ethan's? I asked. Well, yes, Thomas said, blinking. It is a family project. So I pay 100% of the cost, and I own 25% of the asset, I summarized. And I assume I am also liable for the property taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance costs while Ethan plays developer? Ethan's face flushed. You are twisting it. You always do this. You make it sound like a transaction. I am offering you a chance to get in on the ground floor of a multi-million-dollar deal. Do you know what the appreciation rate is in that zip code? It is 12% annually. I am doing you a favor. $1.5 million, I repeated slowly. Ethan, you have never managed a project with a budget over $50,000 without going over by double. You have no experience in construction, no license in real estate, and your credit score is likely in the double digits. No bank will touch you. That is why you are coming to me. Can you do it or not? Nora cut in, her voice losing its sugary coating. Stop analyzing. Clara, can you transfer the $1.5 million? We need it by Friday. I looked at them, really looked at them, for years. I had rationalized their behavior. I had told myself they were just bad with money, or unlucky, or overly optimistic, but looking at them now, under the warm glow of the chandelier, I saw the truth. They were parasites. They didn't love me. They loved my solvency. They looked at me and saw a line of credit that never needed to be repaid. I placed my hands flat on the pristine white tablecloth. No, I said. The word was small, but it landed on the table like a grenade. Ethan's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Thomas froze with his glass raised. Nora's eyes narrowed into slits. "Excuse me?" Nora whispered. "No," I said again, my voice stronger this time. "I will not give you $1.5 million. I will not finance this chalet. I am not investing in this project." "Clara," Thomas started, his voice trembling slightly. "Let's not be hasty. We can discuss the terms, if you want a larger percentage of the equity." "It is not about the equity, Dad," I interrupted. "It is about the fact that I am done. I am done funding Ethan's fantasies. I am done fixing your mistakes. I am done being the bank." Nora's face underwent a terrifying transformation. The sophistication melted away, revealing a sneer of pure, unadulterated ugliness. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You ungrateful little girl," she spat. "How dare you? After everything we have done for you? After everything your father has sacrificed? Who raised you when your mother died? Who made sure you had clothes on your back and food on the table? Me. I did. I stepped in when this family was falling apart. And now, when we have a chance to finally secure our future, to finally have something that puts us on the map, you want to hoard your money like a dragon?" "I earned that money," I said quietly. "I worked 18-hour days for 10 years. I built systems that protect national infrastructure. I didn't stumble into it." "You got lucky!" Ethan slammed his hand on the table, causing the silverware to jump. A few heads turned at nearby tables, but he didn't care. "You think you are so smart? You just happen to be in the right industry at the right time. You think you are better than us? You are not. You are just a cold, heartless bitch who loves her bank account more than her own blood." "Ethan, sit down," Thomas murmured, looking around nervously. "No, I will not sit down," Ethan shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She does this every time. She holds it over us. Remember the bistro? She made me sign a promissory note. For my own sister. She treats me like a stranger. She wants me to fail. That is it, isn't it? You want me to stay a loser so you can feel superior." "I wanted you to be accountable," I said, my pulse pounding in my ears. "I wanted you to succeed. Ethan, that is why I gave you the money, but you drank the profits. You didn't pay the vendors. That wasn't my fault." "That is ancient history," Nora snapped. "Stop bringing up the past to justify your selfishness now. We are talking about $1.5 million. Clara, you have it sitting there. We know you do. Thomas saw your quarterly statement." My head snapped to my father. He looked away, studying the pattern on the tablecloth, his face flushing a deep crimson. "You went through my mail?" I asked, a cold chill running down my spine. "It was on the counter when you visited last month," Thomas mumbled. I glanced at it. "Clara, you have so much, more than you need. Why is it so hard to help your brother get a leg up? Just this once?" "Just this once," I echoed. "It is never just this once. It is a leaking bucket. Dad, no matter how much I pour in, it never fills up." Thomas sighed, shifting tactics. He reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled it back. "Okay," he said, putting on his reasonable negotiator voice. "Okay, fine. Maybe the cash is too much to ask up front. I understand. Liquidating assets has tax implications. I get it. So, we compromise. You don't have to give the cash." He paused, waiting for me to look relieved. I didn't. "Just co-sign the loan," he said, spreading his hands as if he had just solved world peace. "That is all. Ethan can get the financing if he has a strong guarantor. Your credit is impeccable. Your income is verified. You just sign the line as a co-borrower. You don't pay a dime. The bank lends the money based on your profile. Ethan manages the project, sells the house, pays off the loan, and you walk away without spending a penny. It is just a signature. Clara, just ink on paper." I stared at him, incredulous. He was a man who had worked in insurance for 30 years. He knew exactly what co-signing meant. "Do you think I am stupid?" I asked. Co-signing makes me 100% liable for the debt. When Ethan defaults, and he will default, the bank will not call him. They will come for me. They will garnish my wages. They will seize my assets. They will ruin the credit rating I spent a decade building. You are asking me to put my head in a guillotine and trusting Ethan not to let go of the rope. He is your brother, Thomas pleaded. Have some faith. I have faith in patterns, I said. Standing up, my legs felt shaky, but my voice was steady. And the pattern is that you drain me until I am dry. Not this time. I am not signing. I am not paying. The answer is no. I picked up my purse. The restaurant was dead silent around us now. Even the waiters had stopped moving. If you walk away, Nora said, her voice low and dangerous, don't expect to come to Christmas. Don't expect to be part of this family. I looked down at her. Is that a threat, Nora? It is a promise, she said. You think you can exist in this world alone? You need us. I looked at the three of them, a trinity of greed and emotional incompetence. I have prepared for this scenario, I said. The words came out before I filtered them. It was a slip. I hadn't meant to tip my hand so early. Nora froze. Her eyes searched my face, looking for the weakness she was used to finding there. But she didn't see the scared little girl anymore. She saw something else. She saw the chief technology officer. She saw the strategist. What does that mean? Nora asked, her voice faltering for the first time. What have you prepared? I suggest you enjoy your dinner, I said. I believe the bill is coming to you tonight. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, but I could feel Nora's eyes boring into my spine. It wasn't just anger anymore. I knew that look. I had seen it on the faces of hackers when they realized the firewall was learning, when they realized the system was hunting them back. It was fear. And as I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant and into the biting Denver wind, I knew that I had just started a war. I knew they wouldn't let it go. I knew they would come for me, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I was waiting to strike. The attack did not begin with a battering ram or a scream. In my world, the most dangerous invasions rarely do. They start with a ping. It was 3 days after the disastrous dinner at La Lumiere. I was sitting in my office at Sentinel Gate, bathed in the cool blue glow of 3 monitors. The office was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended 20 floors above the Denver skyline. Here, I was safe. Here, logic ruled. The chaos of my family felt like a distant, chaotic radio frequency I had finally managed to mute. Then, a notification slid across my primary screen. It was a red flag alert from the internal security protocols I had designed myself. Suspicious authentication attempt detected. User: C. Whitmore. Personal investment portfolio alpha. Origin: unrecognized device. I frowned. Setting down my coffee, I wasn't logging into my personal accounts. I was currently hunting a polymorphic malware strain for a client in Zurich. I clicked the alert, expanding the metadata. The system had flagged the attempt because, while the password entered was correct, the biometric hash, the keystroke dynamics and mouse movement patterns, did not match my profile. Someone had my password. I felt a cold prickle of adrenaline, the kind that usually came when I was tracking a state-sponsored hacker. I ran the trace on the IP address. In 99% of cases, this would route back to a proxy server in Eastern Europe or a VPN node in Southeast Asia. The geolocation map refreshed. The pin dropped not in a foreign capital, but in the suburbs of Denver, specifically in Highlands Ranch. I zoomed in. The address was not just a neighborhood. It was a specific house, my father's house. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the breath leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. It wasn't a stranger. It was them. My mind raced, rewinding through the last few months, scanning for the vulnerability. How did they have my credentials? I used a 20-character alphanumeric string that rotated every 90 days. I never wrote it down. Then, the memory surfaced. 2 months ago, Sunday brunch, I had brought my laptop to show them photos of a business trip to Tokyo. I had left the room to take a call. When I came back, The laptop was closed, but moved slightly on the coffee table. Or Thanksgiving, Nora asking to borrow my laptop to pay the electric bill because the iPad was acting up. "I just need 2 minutes. Sweetie," she had said. "I am so bad with technology." I had unlocked it for her. I had let her sit there, unsupervised. I had assumed incompetence. I had assumed she was a Luddite who could barely send an email. But Nora was observant. She had watched me type. Or perhaps she had simply gone into my browser settings and clicked Show Password on the saved autofill data. It was social engineering in its purest, most intimate form. They hadn't hacked the firewall. They had simply used the fact that I trusted them enough to leave the gate open. My first instinct was to burn it all down, to call the police, to change every password, to lock them out and scream until they understood the violation. But the strategist in me, the part of me that ran counterintelligence for billion-dollar corporations, took the wheel. If I blocked them now, they would know I knew. They would panic. They would retreat and come up with a new, messier plan, or worse, they would play the victim, claiming it was an accident, a misunderstanding, gaslighting me until I doubted my own logs. No, you do not scare the rat when it is sniffing the cheese. You wait until the trap bar snaps. I picked up my encrypted phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Miles Carter, the voice answered on the first ring. Miles was my financial advisor, a shark in a bespoke suit who managed money for people who had too much of it to count. "Miles, we have a breach," I said, my voice flat. "Define breach," he replied instantly, the professional warmth vanishing. "Are your assets exposed?" "My family has my login credentials for the primary brokerage account," I said. "They are attempting to access the liquidity. Specifically, they are looking for $1.5 million. There was a pause on the line. Miles knew about my family. He was the one who had processed the $60,000 transfer last Christmas, and he had been the one to gently suggest I seek therapy afterwards. "I am freezing the accounts immediately," Miles said. "I will flag it as fraud." "No," I said. "Do not freeze it. Not yet." "Clara," Miles warned, "this is dangerous. If they have the password, they can initiate a wire transfer. We might be able to reverse it, but it is messy." "I want to catch them," I said. "I want indisputable proof, not just an attempted login. I want to see them try to move the money. I want a digital paper trail so thick they can never deny it." I outlined the plan. We would create a honeypot. Miles would migrate 95% of my actual assets into a shadow holding company, invisible to the main dashboard. In the primary account, the one they were currently trying to access, we would leave a balance that looked substantial, exactly $1.6 million, enough to make them salivate, enough to cover the chalet. "But we put a soft lock on the transfer protocol," I explained. "Let them see the money, let them initiate the transfer, but set the system to flag it for manual review. It will look like a standard banking delay to them, but on our end, it will generate a transaction log with their IP address, their device ID, and the timestamp." "You are setting a trap for your parents," Miles said. "It wasn't a judgment, just a statement of fact." "I am setting a trap for thieves," I corrected. "They just happen to share my last name." After hanging up with Miles, I realized that securing the future wasn't enough. I needed to understand the past. If they were willing to steal from me now, what had they done when I was too young to understand the complexities of finance? I made a second call, this time to Dana Holt. Dana was a forensic accountant and estate attorney who had made a name for herself dismantling the hidden fortunes of corrupt politicians during divorce proceedings. She was expensive, ruthless, and exactly what I needed. We met 2 days later in a nondescript coffee shop near the courthouse. Dana was a woman of sharp angles, sharp bob haircut, sharp glasses, sharp suit. She didn't do small talk. She slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "You were right to be suspicious," Dana said, taking a sip of her black coffee. "I pulled the probate records from when your mother passed away. I also did a deep dive into the property deeds for the house in the suburbs and the cabin your father sold 5 years ago." I opened the envelope. It was a photocopy of a legal document, yellowed with age but clearly legible. Your mother's will was standard, Dana explained. She left everything to your father, with the understanding that he would provide for you. That is common. However, 6 months before she died, she filed a codicil, an amendment. She tapped a paragraph on the second page. She established a testamentary trust, Dana said. The house, the one you grew up in, the one Nora is currently remodeling every 6 months, was never meant to be Thomas's outright property. It was placed in a trust for you. Your father was the trustee, meaning he was supposed to manage it for your benefit until you turned 25. I stared at the words, beneficiary, Clara Whitmore. What does this mean? I asked, my voice trembling. It means, Dana said, her eyes hard, that every time your father refinanced that house to pay for Ethan's college, or Nora's car, or a vacation, he was borrowing against your equity. He was stripping value from an asset that was legally yours. He breached his fiduciary duty about a dozen times. But I signed papers, I whispered. Over the years, they would bring me documents, refinancing papers. They said it was just formality because I was on the title as a successor. They likely tricked you into signing waivers, Dana said. Or more likely, they forged your signature on the trustee release forms. I found 3 notarized documents from when you were 19, 21, and 23. Did you sign a release allowing the trust to be dissolved and the deed transferred solely to Thomas Whitmore? No, I said. Never. Then we have forgery, Dana said, leaning back. And not just forgery. We have grand larceny. We have fraud. The cabin they sold? That was part of the trust, too. The proceeds, $400,000, should have gone to you. Instead, it went into a joint account held by Thomas and Nora. I felt sick, physically ill. It wasn't just that they were mooching off me now. They had been cannibalizing my inheritance for decades. The help I had given them over the years, paying off the credit cards, fixing the roof, I was essentially paying to fix my own stolen property. The guilt they had weaponized against me? It was a fabrication. They were the ones who owed me. They owed me everything. What do we do? I asked. We build the case, Dana said. We don't strike yet. We let them think they are safe. We let them think you are the same passive daughter they have always manipulated. We gather the bank records, the forged signatures, the transaction history, and when we have it all, we drop the hammer. I nodded, my mind syncing with hers. The plan with Miles was the bait. Dana's investigation was the cage. They are desperate, I told Dana. They need $1.5 million by Christmas. They are going to try to take it from my account. Dana smiled, a thin, shark-like expression. Good. Let them try. Attempted wire fraud across state lines, since your investment bank is headquartered in New York, is a federal crime. If they click that button, they are not just bad parents. They are felons. I left the coffee shop and drove back to my office. The sky had turned a bruised purple, heavy with unshed snow. I stood at the window of my office, looking down at the city. The lights were coming on, a grid of gold and white against the darkening landscape. I thought about the phrase Nora had whispered to me so many times. Just take it. She would say it when she handed me a bill. She would say it when she handed me a mop to clean up Ethan's mess. She would say it when she forced me to swallow an insult. Just take it. For years, I thought it was a plea for resilience, a call to be strong. Now, I realized it was a command to be complicit. It was the grooming language of a predator ensuring the prey didn't struggle. But the prey had evolved. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I didn't look like the girl who cried in the bathroom because her stepmother made fun of her clothes. I looked like a woman who was about to execute a hostile takeover of her own life. I pulled up the secure chat with Miles on my phone. Status? I typed. Honey is in the pot, Miles replied. Account labeled liquid assets is visible. Balance, 1,600,000. Monitoring software is active. I typed back, let them eat. I watched the first flakes of snow begin to fall, swirling in the updraft of the skyscraper. It was going to be a white Christmas, a perfect, pristine backdrop for a massacre. In the reflection of the glass, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my father. "Clara, honey, we are so sorry about dinner. We were just stressed. Please come for Christmas Eve. We can't imagine the holiday without you. Nora is making your favorite roast." It was the bait. They wanted me in the house. They wanted me close, distracted, physically present so they could manage me while they digitally robbed me. They probably needed me there to intercept any confirmation calls from the bank, or to guilt me into silence if the transfer failed. I typed my reply slowly. "I'll be there. Dad, wouldn't miss it." I pressed send. Let them think they had won. Let them think the sheep was returning to the fold. They had no idea that the wolf was already inside the gate, and she had brought the keys to the slaughterhouse. The strategy session took place in a private booth at The Grind, a coffee shop on the edge of the city where the acoustics absorbed sound and the baristas were too busy to eavesdrop. I sat across from Dana Holt, watching her review the architecture of my plan. She had the look of a lawyer who was used to playing chess, but was suddenly being asked to play rugby. "This is aggressive, Clara," Dana said, tapping her pen against the table. "Extremely aggressive. The standard procedure here is to file a quiet injunction, freeze the assets, and sue for breach of fiduciary duty. We have enough with the forged trust documents to bury them in court for 5 years." "I do not have 5 years," I said, my voice low and steady. "And I do not want a quiet injunction. If we do this quietly, Nora will spin it. She will tell the extended family that I am mentally unstable, that I am attacking them out of jealousy. She will hide the remaining liquidity in offshore shell accounts before a judge can even sign the order. She has done it before." I leaned forward. "I need a total knockout. I need to dismantle their reputation and their finances simultaneously. I need the family to see them for what they are, so that when the handcuffs go on, there is no one left to bail them out." Dana sighed, taking off her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. "You want to stage a sting operation during Christmas dinner." "I want to document a crime in progress," I corrected. "I know they are going to try to access my account on Christmas Eve. The bridge loan for the chalet is due the day after. They are desperate. Desperation makes people predictable." I pulled out a tablet and pulled up the schematic of my father's house. I had mapped it out from memory, overlaying the Wi-Fi dead zones and the high-traffic areas. "The house is a smart home," I explained, swiping to the kitchen view. "Nora is obsessed with having the latest gadgets, even if she doesn't know how to use them. Smart fridge, smart doorbell, smart thermostat. I gifted them a high-end mesh Wi-Fi system 2 years ago. I still have the admin privileges because I am the only one who knows how to update the firmware." "You are going to hack their house?" Dana asked, raising an eyebrow. "I am going to secure the perimeter," I said. "But the built-in cameras aren't enough. They don't cover the blind spots, specifically the laundry room." I tapped the small rectangular room on the map, nestled between the kitchen and the garage entrance. "This is where she does it," I said, my finger hovering over the digital blueprint. "The laundry room. It is soundproofed because of the machines. It is where she takes me when she wants to talk without Thomas hearing. It is where the physical intimidation happens." "Physical?" Dana's head snapped up. "Clara, if you are in danger—" "I can handle it," I said, though the phantom throb in my shoulder suggested otherwise. "But I need it recorded. I have prepared 3 microcameras, high definition, wide angle, battery operated. They look exactly like the motion sensors for the alarm system. I will plant one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and one right here, on the detergent shelf in the laundry room." Dana was silent for a long moment, calculating the liability. "Colorado is a one-party consent state," she said slowly. "As long as you are present in the conversation, you can record it. But if you plant cameras in rooms where you are not present, and they have a reasonable expectation of privacy—" "I will be in the room," I promised, "or the doors will be open. I am not recording them in the bathroom or their bedroom. I am recording the common areas during a party where I am a guest, and the laundry room. Well, When she drags me in there, I will be very much present." Dana nodded, accepting the legal loophole. "Okay, but there are rules, strict ones. You cannot entrap them. You cannot suggest the crime. You cannot say, 'Hey, why don't you try to log into my account?' You have to let them initiate everything. And more importantly, Clara, you cannot instigate violence. If Nora touches you, you do not hit back. You do not escalate. You let the camera do the work. Can you do that?" "I have been not hitting back for 20 years, I said dryly. "I am an expert." "I will be outside," Dana said, closing her notebook. "I will park down the street in a rental car. I want a live feed. If I see a weapon, or if I see blood, I am calling the police immediately. Plan or no plan?" "The police are already part of the plan," I said. "I spoke to Detective Reynolds in the fraud division. He has the file on the trust embezzlement. He is ready to move, but he needs a triggering event to justify an immediate arrest rather than a summons. A live attempt at wire fraud combined with domestic assault? That is his golden ticket." The legal framework was set. Now I needed the financial bait. I called Miles Carter from the car. "It is go time," I told him. "I don't like this, Clara," Miles said, his voice tinny through the Bluetooth speakers. "I feel like I'm sending a sheep into a wolf's den." "I am not the sheep, Miles. I am the shepherd," I said. "Is the trap active?" "It is active," Miles confirmed. "I have set up the Honey account. It shows a balance of $1,600,000. If anyone attempts a transfer over $10,000 from a non-recognized device, it triggers a Level 4 security protocol. The system will auto-lock the funds, but it will generate a processing message on their screen so they think it went through. Simultaneously, it will call your cell phone for voice verification and log the IP address, the device MAC address, and the geolocation of the attempt." "Perfect," I said. "Send me the logs in real time. I want to see the exact second they try to steal from me." "Clara," Miles paused. "Just be careful. Money you can earn back. A head injury is permanent." "I will be fine," I said, and disconnected. There was one final piece of the puzzle, the emotional hammer, the ghost. I drove to a small, neat apartment complex on the north side of Denver. It had been 12 years since I had seen my Aunt Meredith, when my mother died. Meredith had tried to stay in my life, but Nora had made it impossible. Nora had whispered lies to my father that Meredith was trying to poison me against him, that she was unstable. Eventually, Meredith had stopped calling, and I, brainwashed and young, had let her go. Finding her had taken me all of 10 minutes with my resources. When she opened the door, she looked so much like my mother that I almost forgot how to breathe. She had the same gray eyes, the same weary but kind smile. She was wearing a faded cardigan and holding a book. "Clara?" she whispered, her hand going to her mouth. I didn't have time for a slow reconciliation. I stood in the hallway and held out the file Dana had given me, the copies of the forged trust documents and the letter my mother had written before she died, the one Nora had hidden. "They stole it, Aunt Meredith," I said, my voice thick with the grief I usually suppressed. "They stole the house, they stole the cabin money, they stole what Mom left for me, and I am going to take it back on Christmas Eve. I need you to walk through that door with me." Meredith took the file. She read the first page, her hands shaking. Then she looked up, and the sadness in her eyes hardened into something brittle and fierce. "What time?" she asked. 7 o'clock, I said. "I will pick you up." By the time I returned to my penthouse, the sun had set. The city below was a grid of festive lights, oblivious to the war planning happening in the sky. I walked into my bedroom and opened the closet. Hanging on the door was the dress I had bought for the occasion. It was a deep, blood-red velvet, tailored to fit like a second skin. It was elegant, expensive, and completely inappropriate for a humble family gathering. Nora hated red. She said it was aggressive and tacky. She preferred me in beige or gray, colors that blended into the wallpaper, colors that didn't challenge her dominance. This dress was a declaration of war. I laid the 3 micro cameras on the bed next to the dress. They were tiny. black cubes, innocuous to the untrained eye. I checked the battery levels, 100%. I checked my phone, a text from Ethan. "Hey sis, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Mom is making her special eggnog." I stared at the screen. The special eggnog usually meant he wanted to get me drunk enough to agree to something stupid. I sat on the edge of the bed and mentally walked through the heist. Step 1. Arrival, playing the role of the tired, overworked daughter. Step 2. Deployment, planting the cameras while helping in the kitchen and using the bathroom. Step 3. The sting, waiting for the alert from Miles. Step 4. The confrontation, letting Nora drag me to the laundry room. Step 5. The reveal, the garage door opening, Meredith, Dana, the police. It had to be precise. If I moved too early, they would claim it was a misunderstanding. If I moved too late, I might actually get hurt. I picked up the dress and held it against my body in front of the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't smiling. Her eyes were dark, calculating. She looked like someone who had spent 30 years building a fortress around her heart and was finally lowering the drawbridge to let the army out. "Just take it," I whispered to my reflection, testing the weight of the words. For the first time, the phrase didn't make me feel small. It made me feel dangerous. I packed the cameras into my purse, hidden inside a box of tampons, the one place neither my father nor Ethan would ever look. I put the legal file in a hidden compartment of my laptop bag. I walked to the window and looked out at the falling snow. Tomorrow. The Whitmore family Christmas would be picture perfect. There would be a tree, there would be gifts, there would be carols playing softly in the background. And by midnight, the entire illusion would be burned to the ground. I turned off the lights, ready to sleep. I needed to be rested. The performance of my life began in 24 hours, and I intended to steal the show. The Whitmore residence on Christmas Eve was designed to be an assault on the senses, a curated exhibition of wealth that screamed desperate solvency. As I pulled my car up the heated driveway, which had already melted the fresh snowfall into submission, the house loomed like a cruise ship stranded in suburbia. Every roofline was traced in white lights, thousands of them, glowing with a brightness that probably annoyed the neighbors 3 streets over. I checked my purse one last time. The box of tampons, hiding the 3 micro cameras, was sitting right on top. My phone was fully charged. The screen brightness turned down to low. I took a breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs, and stepped out into the night. The front door opened before I even rang the bell. Nora must have been watching the security feed. She stood there framed by the golden warmth of the foyer, wearing a floor-length silver gown that shimmered like fish scales. Her hair was piled high in an intricate updo that likely cost $300 in 2 hours of a stylist's life. "Clara!" she exclaimed, her voice pitched an octave higher than normal, performing for the audience of coats and purses already filling the hall. "You made it. We were worried the snow might delay you." She leaned in for a hug. Her body was rigid, like wire wrapped in silk. As she pulled back, her eyes did a quick, vertical scan of my appearance. She lingered on my dress, the deep red velvet that I knew clashed with her silver and blue winter wonderland theme. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, but she smoothed it over instantly. "And you brought wine," she said, taking the bottle I held out. It was a decent Cabernet, something you could pick up for $40 at a local liquor store. It was respectable, but for a Whitmore Christmas, it was an insult. She expected a vintage, or perhaps a case of champagne. "I thought it would pair well with the roast," I said, my voice neutral. "How thoughtful," Nora said, her smile not reaching her eyes. She handed the bottle to a passing caterer without looking at it. "Put this with the others, in the back." I stepped into the living room, and the wall of noise hit me. The room was packed. Thomas had invited everyone, his old partners from the insurance firm, the neighbors who owned the car dealerships, the couple from the club who always bragged about their horses. It was a room full of people who measured worth by the weight of a watch. The tree was a monster, easily 12 feet tall, suffocating under the weight of glass ornaments and silver ribbons. Beneath it, the presents were stacked in a precise pyramid. I noticed the wrapping paper was thick, textured foil, the kind that cost $20 a roll. I moved through the crowd, a shark in red velvet. I wasn't just walking, I was scouting. I placed my purse on a side table near the main seating area, angling it slightly so the small lens I had already activated in the clasp would catch the wide shot of the room. "Clara!" My father's voice boomed from the fireplace. Thomas Whitmore was holding a tumbler of scotch, his face flushed with heat and alcohol. He looked the part of the benevolent patriarch, wearing a cashmere sweater that softened the edges of his anxiety. "Hello, Dad," I said, letting him embrace me. He smelled of peat and nervous sweat. "I am so glad you are here," he whispered in my ear, his grip a little too tight. "Please, let's have a good night, for your mother's sake." He meant Nora, of course. He always referred to her as mother in these settings, a subtle linguistic reprogramming he had been attempting for 20 years. "I am just here to celebrate, Dad," I said, pulling away. Good, he nodded, too quickly. He turned to the group of men he was holding court with. "You remember Clara? My daughter, the computer whiz." "The director of technology," I corrected gently, though I knew it wouldn't stick. Right. She runs the internet over at Sentinel Gate." Thomas laughed, diminishing a job that protected national infrastructure into a tech support role. "She is always working, married to the laptop. This one." The men chuckled politely. One of them, a heavy-set man named Gerald, who I knew had just filed for bankruptcy protection for his construction firm, leaned in. "Must be nice to have job security these days. Clara, your brother was just telling us about his new venture. Real estate, is it?" My stomach tightened. "Ethan is very enthusiastic," I said diplomatically. "Enthusiastic? The boy is a shark." Gerald laughed. "He was telling me about this chalet deal. Sounds like a gold mine. $4 million asset for a steal? I told Thomas he is lucky to have a son with that kind of vision." I looked across the room. Ethan was holding court by the wet bar. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo jacket with black lapels, looking like he had just stepped off a red carpet. He was gesturing wildly with a martini glass, surrounded by a group of young women who were clearly impressed by the shine of his teeth. I walked over, needing to gauge the level of delusion. As I approached, I saw it. Lying on the marble counter next to his elbow was a key fob. It was heavy, black, and bore the unmistakable crest of a Porsche. "Clara!" Ethan shouted when he saw me, throwing an arm around my shoulder. He was already drunk, his eyes glassy and bright. "Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence, the bank vault herself." The girls giggled. "Nice keys?" I said, nodding at the fob. "New car?" Ethan grinned, picking up the keys and tossing them in the air. "Porsche Cayenne Turbo. Just picked it up this morning. Needed something rugged for the mountains, right? Can't drive a sedan up to the chalet." "I didn't realize the chalet deal had closed," I said, keeping my voice low. "Or that you had the liquidity for a $100,000 car." Ethan leaned in, his breath hot and smelling of gin. "It is a lease, sis. Tides me over until the funding hits on Monday. You know how it is. You have to look the part to get the part. Confidence capital." He winked. It was a conspiratorial wink, as if we were both in on the joke, as if he hadn't spent the last 3 weeks harassing me for the money to pay for the very lifestyle he was currently flaunting. He had spent the money before he even had it. He had signed a lease based on a theft he hadn't yet committed. "Ethan, honey, tell the Davises about the heated driveway." Nora appeared out of nowhere, slipping her arm through Ethan's. She looked at me, her smile tight. "Isn't it exciting, Clara? Your brother is finally building something for all of us." She turned to the couple standing nearby. "We are so proud. It has been a team effort. Really, families have to stick together in this economy. We pool our resources. Clara here." She paused, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her fingers dug in, just slightly, a warning. Clara manages the technical side of things, but Ethan has the vision, Nora said. And we all know that vision is what creates wealth. We are just so blessed that Clara understands her role in supporting the family legacy. The phrasing was masterful. She had just publicly claimed credit for my money, assigned me a subservient role, and framed my potential refusal as a betrayal of the legacy. If I spoke up now, if I said, I am not paying for it, I would look like the petty, jealous sister ruining Christmas. It is certainly a complex financial structure, I said, smiling thinly. Nora patted my cheek. She is so modest, always worrying about the details. But that is why we love her, right? She keeps the books while the men build the empire. I felt a vibration against my hip. It was a single, long buzz, the signal I had been waiting for. I carefully extracted myself from Nora's grip, murmuring something about needing a refill. I walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the snowy backyard, turning my back to the room. I slipped my phone out of my clutch. The screen was black, but as I tapped it, a notification from the encrypted messaging app pulsed in red. Sender: Miles Carter. Timestamp: 7:42 p.m. Message: Alert. Level 4. Security trigger. Incoming transfer request detected. Amount: $1,500,000. Origin IP matches previous residential tag. Authorization pending user verification. My heart didn't race. It stopped. They were doing it. Right now. While Ethan was drinking gin and bragging about a Porsche. While Thomas was laughing by the fire. While Nora was playing the perfect hostess. Someone, likely using a device set up in the back office or perhaps an automated script they had bought online, had clicked the button. They were trying to rob me while I stood 10 feet away drinking their wine. I looked at the time. 7:43. They must have set it to execute during the party, assuming I would be distracted, assuming I wouldn't check my notifications, or perhaps hoping that if the bank called, I wouldn't hear the ringtone over the music. I typed a single character response to Miles. Why? Wait, I corrected mentally. Stick to the plan. The plan was to let the attempt log, then fail at the secondary authentication level, forcing them to confront me. I looked at the log details attached to the message. Device, MacBook Pro, admin. That was my father's computer, the one in the study. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I turned around to face the room. The scene looked different now. It wasn't just a party. It was a crime scene. Every laugh felt sharp. Every clink of glass sounded like a hammer cocking. I caught Nora's eye across the room. She was watching me. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was studying me, looking for a sign that I had received an alert. She knew. She knew exactly what was happening. She whispered something to Thomas, then smoothed her dress and began walking toward me. Her movement was predatory, a glide that cut through the crowd without disturbing it. Clara, she said when she reached me. Her voice was low, intimate. You look tired. Is the noise too much? It is a lot of stimulation, I said. Come, she said, hooking her arm through mine. Come into the kitchen with me. I need help with the glazing for the ham. It will be quieter there. Just us girls. The invitation was innocent on the surface, but the subtext was screaming. The kitchen connected to the laundry room. The laundry room was the kill box. She wanted to isolate me. Maybe she needed a physical override code. Maybe the bank had asked for a secondary password she didn't have. Or maybe she just wanted to ensure I stayed occupied while the transfer processed. I would love to help, I said. Nora smiled, but her eyes were cold. Hard flints of blue. Good. You know, Clara, tonight is a turning point. I can feel it. Everything is going to change for us after tonight. I think you are right, Nora, I said, letting her lead me away from the safety of the crowd. I think everything is going to change. As we walked past the tree, I saw Ethan glance at his watch, then at us. He gave Nora a nearly imperceptible nod. The trap was fully sprung. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they were walking a sheep to the slaughter. I touched the clasp of my purse, ensuring the camera was still recording, and stepped into the hallway. following my stepmother toward the bright, sterile light of the kitchen and the dark, waiting maw of the laundry room beyond. The transition from the kitchen to the laundry room was a passage between worlds. One moment, I was standing on the warm slate tiles of the chef's kitchen, surrounded by the smell of glazed ham and the hum of expensive appliances. The next, Nora's grip on my elbow tightened into a vice, and she pulled me through the service door. She closed it behind us with a definitive click. The silence was instantaneous and suffocating. The heavy, fire-rated core of the door severed the connection to the party. Bing Crosby was silenced. The laughter of the neighbors was extinguished. We were left in a small, sterile box illuminated by a single, flickering fluorescent strip that cast a sickly blue pallor over Nora's silver dress. The room smelled of bleach and ozone, a sharp chemical tang that stung the back of my throat. The washing machine was running a cycle, the rhythmic thump-swish acting as a metronome for the impending violence. Nora didn't waste time with pleasantries. The mask of the gracious hostess dissolved, revealing the desperate feral creature beneath. She didn't let go of my arm. Instead, she shoved me backward. I stumbled, my lower back colliding with the hard edge of the folding counter. "You got an alert," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was a low hiss, vibrating with suppressed fury. "I saw you check your phone. You know we tried to push the transfer." I straightened up, smoothing the velvet of my dress. I was terrified. Yes, the reptilian part of my brain that remembered being 12 years old was screaming at me to run. But the analytical part, the part that had planned this operation for weeks, was calm. I glanced imperceptibly toward the shelf above the dryer, where a box of detergent sat slightly askew. Inside the dark lettering of the brand logo, a tiny lens was watching. "I got a fraud alert." "Nora," I said, my voice steady. "Someone attempted an unauthorized wire transfer of $1,500,000 from my brokerage account. I assumed it was a hacker. I didn't realize it was my family." "Don't you use that tone with me," Nora snapped. She reached into the drawer next to the sink, a drawer usually reserved for lint rollers and stray buttons, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She slapped it onto the counter between us. "The bank is holding the transfer pending a signature," she said. "They need a wet signature on file to override the security lock because the amount is over the daily limit. We anticipated you might be difficult about the digital authorization." She ripped the envelope open and pulled out a stack of documents, thrusting them toward my chest. "Sign them," she commanded. "Now, before we go back out there to cut the cake." I looked down at the papers. They were drafted on legal letterhead, likely by a lawyer who didn't ask too many questions, or more likely, forged using a template Thomas had found online. The title at the top read, "Family Asset Consolidation and Durable Power of Attorney." It was worse than I thought. They didn't just want the money for the chalet. They wanted the keys to the kingdom. This document would grant Thomas and Nora full legal authority to manage, liquidate, and transfer assets from my personal portfolio for the benefit of the family trust. It was a complete abdication of my financial independence. "This isn't a loan," I said, reading the fine print. "This gives you control over everything, my stock options, my retirement, my savings." "It simplifies things," Nora said, uncapping a heavy fountain pen and shoving it into my hand. "We are a family. Clara, we shouldn't have secrets. We shouldn't have separate piles of money. It is insulting to your father that you hoard wealth while he worries about the mortgage." "I am 32 years old," I said, dropping the pen onto the counter. It clattered loudly. "I am not signing over my life to you, and I am not buying Ethan a ski house." Nora's eyes widened. She wasn't used to direct defiance. For years, my no had been soft, wavering, eventually crumbling into a yes under the weight of her guilt trips. This no was solid. It had edges. "You have to," she whispered. Stepping into my personal space, I could smell the wine on her breath, sour and heavy. "The deal closes in 48 hours. Ethan has already put down a non-refundable deposit on the contractors. He has leased the car. If this money doesn't clear, he loses everything. He will be humiliated. Then let him be humiliated, I said. Maybe it will teach him not to spend money he doesn't have. The slap came out of nowhere. It was fast, practiced, and brutal. Her palm connected with my cheekbone with a wet crack that seemed to echo against the tile. My head snapped to the side. The pain was a sharp, hot explosion, radiating into my ear and jaw. I tasted blood immediately, a metallic bloom on my tongue where my tooth had cut into the inside of my cheek. I didn't lift my hand to touch it. I didn't cry out. I stayed exactly where I was. My face turned away, letting the camera get a clear profile shot of the impact site. "You selfish little bitch," Nora hissed. She grabbed my shoulders, her fingers digging into the soft flesh of my arms through the velvet sleeves. She slammed me back against the upper cabinets. The wood groaned. The impact rattled my teeth. "Look at me," she screamed in a whisper, shaking me. "Look at me when I am talking to you." I turned my head slowly. I made sure my eyes were wide, projecting the fear that she wanted to see, the fear that would goad her into incriminating herself further. "You think you are better than us?" she spat, her face inches from mine. "You think because you can write code and sit in a glass tower that you are special? You are nothing. You are a cold, broken thing that no one wants." "Stop," I whispered. "Please." "I will stop when you do what you are told," she said, shoving the papers against my chest again. "You owe us this, Clara. You owe us everything. Do you know who changed your diapers? Me. Do you know who made sure you had a roof over your head after your mother died? Me. My mother left me a trust," I said quietly. "She left me the house." The mention of the trust acted like gasoline on a fire. Nora's face went rigid. The vein in her forehead throbbed. "Your mother left you nothing but burden," she snarled. "That woman was weak. She died and left Thomas with a mountain of medical bills and a sullen, ungrateful child. I saved this family. I worked. I sacrificed. I made this house a home. And you? You just took up space. You were never really Thomas's daughter. You were just the baggage he had to carry." It was a lie, a cruel, vicious lie designed to sever the one emotional tether I had left. But hearing it out loud, recorded in high definition, felt less like an insult and more like a confession. "Sign the papers," she said, grabbing my wrist and trying to force the pen back into my fingers. "Sign them, or I swear to God, Clara, I will make your life a living hell. I will tell everyone at that party that you embezzled from us. I will tell them you are unstable. I will have you committed if I have to." She squeezed my wrist hard. Her nails biting into the skin, I winced, letting my body go limp, sliding down slightly against the washing machine. I needed the marks. I needed the physical evidence of coercion. "You are hurting me," I said, my voice clear enough for the microphone. "I will hurt you more if you don't stop acting like a child," Nora shouted, abandoning the whisper. "Just take it. Just take the pen and sign the damn paper. Why is it always so hard with you? Just take it like you always do." "I can't," I gasped, pulling my arm back, but she held fast, twisting my wrist. "You will," she said. "You will sign it, and then you will wash your face, put on some lipstick, and go out there and smile. You will tell your father that you are happy to help Ethan. You will play your part, Clara, because if you don't, if you ruin this for us—" She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "If you don't fix this," she whispered, "I will make sure you lose that precious job of yours. I know things, Clara. I know about the accounts you think are hidden. I know about the little secrets in your medical file. I will destroy you." I looked at her, letting a tear escape. It wasn't acting anymore. The pain in my wrist was real. The hatred radiating off her was radioactive. "Just take it," she repeated, the mantra of my abuse. "Stop fighting. It is easier if you just surrender." She pinned me against the vibrating washing machine, her forearm pressing against my throat, cutting off my air for a second. It was a control tactic, a dominance display. "You have been stealing from me for years," I choked out. "The roof, the car, the trust. We took what was owed, Nora shrieked. It was family money. It all goes into the same pot. You don't get to have millions while we struggle. That is not how family works. She raised her hand again, the diamond ring on her finger catching the fluorescent light like a star. She was going to hit me again. She was going to open up the cut on my lip. I braced myself. I didn't fight back. I didn't raise my hands to defend myself. I just watched her, memorizing the face of the woman who had stolen my childhood. You are going to sign, she said, her voice dropping to a terrifying, calm register. And you are going to thank me for letting you help. And if I don't? I asked. Then you will wish you had died with your mother, she said. It was the unforgivable line, the point of no return. Nora, I said, my voice surprisingly strong. I am not signing. She screamed in frustration, a guttural sound, and shoved my head back against the cabinet one last time. She jammed the pen into my hand so hard the plastic barrel cracked. There are things I have done to protect you, she yelled, losing all control. Things your father and I did behind your back that you don't even know about. We doctored those records to keep you safe. We lied to the lawyers to keep you out of trouble. If you dig into this, Clara, if you try to fight us, you will find out exactly what we are capable of. She was panting, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. She was confessing to fraud. She was confessing to conspiracy. She was handing me the keys to her own prison cell. What things? I asked, pushing for one last detail. What did you do behind my back? You don't want to know, she hissed, gripping my jaw. But trust me, Clara, if you think you can audit us, you are going to find a graveyard. The threat hung in the air, heavy and toxic. And then, the sound of the universe correcting itself cut through the hum of the washing machine. Click, whirr. The heavy steel door behind Nora, the one leading to the garage, the one she thought was locked and secure, began to rise. It wasn't the automatic garage door. It was the pedestrian door connecting the garage to the laundry room. The lock turned, the handle depressed. Nora froze. Her hand was still gripping my jaw. Her body was still pressing me against the counter. She looked at me, confusion clouding her rage. She hadn't heard a car pull up. She hadn't heard the keypad. The door swung open, bringing with it a gust of freezing wind and swirling snow that danced across the linoleum floor. Nora spun around, her hand dropping from my face, her mouth opening to scream at the intruder, to tell them this was a private conversation. But the scream died in her throat. Standing in the doorway, framed by the darkness of the garage and the harsh halo of the motion sensor security light, was not a guest. It was not a caterer. It was my Aunt Meredith. She was wearing a heavy wool coat covered in fresh snow, her gray hair whipped by the wind. But she wasn't looking at the snow. She was looking at Nora. She was looking at the hand that had just been around my throat. She was looking at the blood on my lip. And behind her, stepping out of the shadows like grim reapers in business casual, were Dana Holt and a uniformed police officer. They had heard it. They had heard the scream. They had heard the slap. They had heard the confession about the graveyard of secrets. Nora took a step back, her heels clicking on the tile. She looked from Meredith to the police officer, then back to me. The color drained from her face so fast, it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. Nora stammered, her hands trembling as she reached out to steady herself on the washing machine. We were just talking. Meredith stepped into the room. The temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. She looked at the papers scattered on the floor. She looked at the red marks blooming on my neck. We heard you, Meredith said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 20 years of silence. We heard everything. Nora, especially the part about the things you did behind her back. The sudden influx of freezing air was a physical shock, but it was nothing compared to the seismic shift in the atmosphere of the room, the laundry room. Moments ago, a sealed chamber of violence and coercion had been breached. Meredith stood there like an apparition from a past I had been forced to forget. She was wearing a thick charcoal wool coat that was dusted with fresh snow, and her boots left wet, dark prints on the pristine linoleum. She looked older than I remembered, lines of grief and time etched around her eyes, but her posture was made of steel. She did not look at me. Her gaze was locked onto Nora's hand, which was still gripping my jaw, and Nora's other hand, which was pinning my shoulder to the cabinets. Behind Meredith, the garage was not empty. Stepping out of the shadows of the parked cars were 3 more figures. First was Dana Holt, my attorney, clutching a briefcase and looking sharp enough to cut glass. Behind her was a uniformed police officer, his hand resting instinctively near his belt, and a man in a plain windbreaker holding a handheld video camera, the red recording light glowing like a warning beacon in the dim light. Nora reacted with the jerky, panicked instinct of a predator caught in a spotlight. She snatched her hands away from me as if my skin had suddenly turned red hot. She took a stumbling step back, her heels clacking against the tile, and smoothed the front of her silver dress with trembling hands. "Meredith," Nora breathed, the name coming out as a strangled gasp. She blinked rapidly, her face contorting into a grotesque mask of concern. She reached out a hand toward me, hovering in the air, trying to rewrite the narrative in real time. "Thank God you are here. She is having an episode. I was just trying to calm her down. She is hysterical. She won't sign the medical release forms." It was a brilliant lie, improvised in a split second, but it withered and died the moment it hit the cold air. Meredith stepped fully into the room, forcing Nora to retreat until her back hit the washing machine. Meredith didn't shout. She didn't scream. She spoke with a terrifying, absolute calm. "I heard you." "Nora," Meredith said, "we all heard you. We heard the slap. We heard you threaten to destroy her, and we heard you talk about the graveyard of secrets you and Thomas buried." Nora's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked past Meredith to the camera lens that was pointed directly at her face. "This is a private home," Nora squeaked, her voice rising in pitch. "You cannot be in here. This is trespassing. Thomas! "I am not trespassing." Dana Holt stepped forward, her voice projecting with the practiced authority of a courtroom litigator. "My name is Dana Holt. I am Clara Whitmore's retained counsel, and we are here under the exigent circumstances of preventing immediate physical harm and financial felony." Dana looked at me. "Clara, are you all right?" I pushed myself off the cabinet, my legs shaking. I touched my lip, and my fingers came away red. "I am okay," I whispered. "She hit me. She tried to force me to sign a power of attorney." "That is a lie!" Nora screamed, the facade cracking. "She is lying! She fell! She is drunk!" "We have the audio recording. Mrs. Whitmore," Dana said, lifting her phone. "We have a live feed from 3 cameras inside this house. We heard you tell her to just take it. We heard the impact, and we have the video from the camera Clara is wearing." Nora's eyes snapped to my purse, then to the brooch on my dress, realizing the depth of the surveillance. The blood drained from her face completely, leaving her looking gray and aged under the harsh fluorescent light. The door to the kitchen, the one we had entered through, burst open. "What is going on in here?" Thomas Whitmore demanded, rushing in. He was holding a half-empty glass of scotch, his face flushed with the heat of the party. "Nora," I heard shouting, "the guests are asking." He stopped dead. He saw the police officer, he saw the camera, and then he saw Meredith. The glass slipped from his fingers. It didn't shatter. It bounced on the linoleum with a dull thud, spilling amber liquid across the floor, soaking into the hem of Nora's silver gown. "Meredith?" Thomas whispered. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. He looked at me, leaning against the counter with a bleeding lip, and then back to the sister-in-law he had banished from our lives 2 decades ago. "Hello, Thomas?" Meredith said. Her voice was not warm. It was the sound of a judge passing sentence. "You look well, better than my sister did at the end." "What are you doing here?" Thomas stammered, looking frantically between the police officer and Nora. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. These people are interrupting a family Christmas party. I need you to remove them." "We are not going anywhere, Thomas," Meredith said. She reached into the deep pocket of her wool coat and pulled out a thick, folded document. It was old, the edges soft with wear, protected by a plastic sleeve. She held it up. "Do you recognize this?" Meredith asked. Thomas squinted, and then his eyes widened in recognition. He paled, stepping back until he bumped into the doorframe. That is not. It is the original copy of Sarah's will," Meredith said, her voice cutting through the room. "And the handwritten codicil she mailed to me 3 days before she died. The one you told me never existed. The one you told Clara was a figment of her imagination." "That is ancient history," Thomas said, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "We settled the estate 20 years ago. The lawyers handling it said." "The lawyers handling it were fired by you a week after the funeral," Dana interrupted, stepping in. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a fresh stack of files, slamming them onto the washing machine next to Nora. "And replaced by a notary friend of yours who lost his license for fraud in 2010. Dana opened the file, pointing to a highlighted section. "We have reviewed the probate records, Mr. Whitmore," Dana said. "The house we are standing in? The one you just took a second mortgage out on to pay for your country club dues? It does not belong to you. It was placed in a testamentary trust for Clara. You were the trustee, not the owner. You had a fiduciary duty to preserve the asset until she turned 25. We needed the money for the family," Thomas sputtered, looking at Nora for help, but Nora was pressed against the wall, breathing shallowly. "It costs money to raise a child. The remodel, the schools." "You forged her signature on the trust dissolution documents," Dana continued, relentless. "We have the forensic handwriting analysis. Clara never signed the release, which means every time you refinanced this house, you committed mortgage fraud, and every time you asked Clara to pay for the roof, or the boiler, or the taxes, you were tricking her into maintaining an asset that was already hers. I watched my father. I watched the man I had spent my life trying to please, trying to save. I saw him crumble. He didn't look angry. He looked pathetic. He looked like a man who had built a castle on a foundation of lies and was shocked that it was finally sinking. "Clara," Thomas pleaded, turning to me, his eyes wet. "You have to understand. We were drowning. Nora. She has expensive tastes. I just wanted to keep the peace. I didn't mean to steal from you. It was all going to be yours eventually anyway." "Eventually?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "You just tried to steal another $1,500,000 from me tonight. Dad, was that for me too?" "We were going to pay it back," Nora shrieked, suddenly finding her voice again. She pushed off the washing machine, her hands clawing the air. "It was an investment. The chalet would have made millions. We did it for you, you ungrateful little brat." The police officer stepped forward, his hand raised. "Ma'am, step back." "No," Nora yelled, her eyes wild. "You don't understand. She has plenty. She has millions sitting in accounts doing nothing. She doesn't need it. We are her parents. We have a right to it." "Actually, you don't," the officer said calmly. "Based on the report filed by Ms. Whitmore and the transaction logs provided by her bank regarding the attempted wire transfer at 7:43 p.m. tonight, we have probable cause to believe you attempted to commit wire fraud, combined with the assault I just witnessed." He reached for the handcuffs on his belt. "You are under arrest," the officer said. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Arrest? In the Whitmore house? On Christmas Eve? Nora looked at the handcuffs. Then she looked at the open door to the kitchen. Through the frame, the sounds of the party drifted in. Laughter, clinking glasses, the soft croon of a holiday ballad. She couldn't process it. In her mind, the laundry room was a private hell where she made the rules, but the real world had just kicked down the door. Panic took over. Pure, animalistic panic. "No," Nora gasped. "No, you are not doing this to me. Not tonight. I have guests. I have a reputation." She lunged. She didn't lunge at me. She lunged for the door. She shoved Thomas aside, sending him stumbling into the counter, and bolted into the kitchen. "Nora!" Thomas yelled. "Secure her!" the officer shouted, pushing past Thomas. I didn't move. I watched them run. I watched Meredith stand still, clutching the will to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she looked at me. "I am so sorry, Clara," Meredith whispered. "I should have come back sooner. I should have fought harder." "You are here now," I said, wiping the blood from my lip. "Let's go finish this." I walked out of the laundry room. The kitchen was empty, but the chaos was moving like a wave into the living room. I followed the sound of Nora's voice. She wasn't running to hide. She was running to her stage. She was running to the audience she thought would protect her. I stepped through the archway into the great room, the red velvet of my dress catching the lights of the Christmas tree. The scene before me was a masterpiece of disaster. Nora had made it to the center of the room, near the fireplace. She was breathing hard, her hair coming loose from its pins. The guests, the neighbors, the business partners, the friends, had stopped talking. The music had been cut. The silence was absolute. Ethan was standing by the bar, holding his martini glass, staring at his mother with his mouth open. "Mom?" Ethan asked. "What is going on? Who are these people?" Nora turned to the crowd, her arms wide, trying to summon the charm that had served her for 30 years. "Everyone, please," she panted, her voice trembling. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. My stepdaughter, Clara. She has brought these people here to cause a scene. She is unwell. She has been drinking." She pointed a shaking finger at the hallway where I stood. "She is trying to ruin Christmas," Nora cried, tears springing to her eyes on command. "After everything we have done for her, she brought the police to our home." The guests turned to look at me. I stood there, flanked by Meredith, Dana, and the officer who was now moving through the crowd toward Nora. They saw the blood on my chin. They saw the red marks on my neck. They saw the calm, cold resolve in my eyes. And then they saw the video camera in the investigator's hand, connected to a small monitor that Dana held up. Mrs. Whitmore, Dana's voice boomed across the room, projecting to the back corners where the most judgmental neighbors stood. "We are not here because Clara is unwell. We are here because 10 minutes ago, you assaulted your stepdaughter in the laundry room while trying to coerce her into signing a fraudulent power of attorney." A gasp rippled through the room. "And," Dana continued, pointing at Thomas, who was cowering in the kitchen doorway, "because you and your husband have spent the last 20 years embezzling from the trust fund left to her by her late mother. This house, the wine you are drinking, the car Ethan is driving, it was all paid for with stolen money." Ethan dropped his glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot. "That is a lie," Ethan shouted, stepping forward, his face red. "My dad paid for this. I paid for this. I am a developer." "You are a suspect," the officer said, stepping between Ethan and Nora. "We have the logs from your computer. Son, the attempted transfer of $1,500,000. We know you initiated it." The room spun with confusion. The guests began to back away, creating a wide circle around the family. The facade of the perfect Whitmore Christmas was dissolving in real time, melting away to reveal the rot underneath. Nora looked around the room, searching for an ally. She looked at the Davises. She looked at Gerald. But no one met her eye. They were looking at her like she was a stranger, like she was a contagion. She turned to me. Her eyes were no longer pleading. They were hateful. "You did this!" she screamed, abandoning the victim act entirely. "You ungrateful, hateful bitch! You planned this. You wanted to humiliate us." I stepped forward, just one step, into the center of the circle. "I didn't plan to humiliate you. Nora," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying to the vaulted ceiling. "I just planned to stop paying for the show." I looked at the guests, then at my father, then at Ethan, and finally at Nora. "The bank is closed," I said. "Permanently." The officer reached Nora, He didn't ask her to turn around this time. He grabbed her wrist, the same wrist she had used to pin me against the wall, and spun her around. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. "Nora Whitmore," the officer recited, "you are under arrest for assault, extortion, and wire fraud." As he began to read her rights, Thomas slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor, burying his face in his hands. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the keys to the Porsche that lay on the bar, realizing they were no longer keys to a car, but evidence in a crime. I stood in the wreckage of the holiday, feeling the cold draft from the open door, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I just watched it burn. The silence in the great room was absolute. It was not the peaceful silence of a winter night, but the suffocating vacuum that follows an explosion. Meredith stepped forward, her boots leaving wet tracks on the Persian rug. She looked at the stereo system in the corner, where a holiday playlist was still cycling through cheerful classics. "Turn it off," Meredith commanded. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a judge's gavel. One of the guests, a young cousin near the speaker, scrambled to obey. The music died instantly, cutting Bing Crosby off mid-chorus. The only sound left was the crackling of the fire and the heavy, ragged breathing of Nora Whitmore, who stood center stage with her wrists bound behind her back in gleaming silver handcuffs. The guests, friends, neighbors, business associates, were paralyzed. They held their wine glasses like shields, unsure whether to flee or watch the train wreck. They looked from the police officer to Nora, then to Thomas huddled against the wall, and finally to me. I stood by the archway, dabbing my lip with a cocktail napkin. I watched the scene with a detachment that frightened me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply the auditor, here to balance the books. Dana Holt walked to the center of the room. She didn't look like a guest. She looked like an executioner in a pantsuit. She carried a thick leather binder, which she dropped onto the glass coffee table with a heavy, deliberate thud. "This," Dana announced, her voice projecting to the back of the room, "is a forensic accounting of the last 10 years of finances for the Whitmore household." She opened the binder. It was a sea of red ink. "For years, Thomas and Nora Whitmore have presented themselves as successful investors and philanthropists," Dana said, turning a page. "But the reality is that this entire lifestyle, the cars, the vacations, the renovations, even the catering for this party, has been funded by the systematic embezzlement of assets belonging to Clara Whitmore." "That is private business," Thomas shouted from the floor, trying to struggle to his feet. "You have no right to air this in front of our friends." "They are not your friends, Thomas," Meredith cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. "They are witnesses." Dana pointed to a column on the spreadsheet. $3.2 million. That is the total principal amount taken from Clara's trust, her stock options, and her personal savings over the last decade. That does not include the interest or the appreciation value of the assets liquidated without her consent. A gasp rippled through the room. I saw Mrs. Gable, the neighbor who always bragged about Nora's generosity, cover her mouth with her hand. $3 million? Someone whispered. Ethan stepped forward then. He looked shaky, his face pale, but he still had the arrogance of someone who believed he could talk his way out of gravity. "This is ridiculous," Ethan scoffed, trying to laugh. $3 million? Clara doesn't even have that kind of money. She is a tech worker, not a hedge fund manager. It is creative accounting. My parents helped her invest. If there are losses, that is just the market. You can't criminalize bad luck." The police officer stepped closer to Ethan. "It isn't bad luck, son. It is grand larceny." Ethan bristled. "You don't know what you are talking about. I am a businessman. I have a deal closing on Monday that will cover all of this. The chalet project." "The chalet project," the officer interrupted, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket, "is being funded by a wire transfer that was initiated 40 minutes ago from this house. A transfer of $1,500,000 from a tract account belonging to your sister." Ethan froze. We traced the IP address. Ethan, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. It came from Dad's computer, but the login pattern, the timestamp, it matches the exact moment you went to the bathroom before coming out to brag about your Porsche. Ethan looked at me, his eyes wide with betrayal. You set me up. I protected myself, I corrected. That account was a honeypot. Ethan, the money isn't real, but the felony you committed by trying to move it? That is very real. Ethan looked at the keys to the Porsche on the bar. He looked at the officer. He realized, finally, that the car was never going to leave the driveway. "Dad told me to do it," Ethan shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Thomas. "He said Clara wouldn't mind. He said she was just being difficult and we needed to override the system. I was just following instructions." "Ethan!" Nora shrieked, struggling against the cuffs. "Shut your mouth!" "He is throwing you under the bus." "Nora," Meredith said coldly, "just like you threw Clara under the bus for 20 years. Thomas finally managed to stand up. He wiped his face with a shaking hand. Trying to summon the dignity of the patriarch one last time, he smoothed his sweater, looked around at the shocked faces of his guests, and put on a weak, trembling smile. "Please," Thomas said, holding up his hands. "Everyone, let's not lose perspective. Yes, finances are complicated. Yes, we move some money around. But this is a family matter. It is an internal arrangement. Clara knows how we operate. We share everything. What is mine is hers. What is hers is ours. We are a unit." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Clara, honey, tell them. Tell them we have an understanding. Tell them you are happy to help the family. Don't let them take your mother away on Christmas." The room turned to me. The pressure was immense. For 30 years, that pressure had crushed me into silence. Just take it. Keep the peace. Be the good girl. But then Meredith stepped up beside me. She reached into her coat and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "She doesn't have an understanding with you, Thomas," Meredith said. "And neither did Sarah." Thomas went white. "Don't read that," he whispered. "Meredith, please." Meredith opened the letter. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. "This is a letter Sarah wrote to me 3 days before she died," Meredith announced. "She knew. Thomas, she knew what you were. She knew what Nora was." Meredith raised the letter and read aloud. "If anything happens to me, Meredith, you must protect Clara. Thomas is weak. He is already letting that woman make decisions. I have set up the trust so that he cannot touch the principal. But I am terrified he will find a way. Please, don't let Nora touch Clara's money. She will strip my daughter bare to feed her own vanity." Meredith lowered the letter. The silence in the room was heavy enough to crush bones. "You violated her dying wish," Meredith said to Thomas, "and then you lied to Clara about it for decades." "I had to," Thomas cried, his voice cracking. "We were going to lose the house. The business was failing. I did it to keep a roof over Clara's head." "No," Dana Holt interjected, flipping a page in her binder. "You did it to keep up appearances, and when the cash ran out, you started leveraging the assets." Dana looked at the guests. "Does anyone here know who actually owns this house?" A few people glanced around nervously. "Thomas does," Gerald said hesitantly. "He has lived here for 30 years. "Incorrect," Dana said. "The deed is in the name of the Sarah Whitmore Testamentary Trust, or at least, it was, until 5 years ago." She pulled out a document with a heavy seal. 5 years ago, a loan was taken out against the equity of this property, Dana explained. A mortgage of $800,000. The borrower listed on the application, Clara Whitmore. My head snapped up. I looked at Dana. "I never applied for a mortgage." "I know," Dana said gently, "but your signature is on the application, and on the promissory note, and on the default notices that started arriving 3 months ago." She turned the document around so the room could see the signature at the bottom. It was a shaky, crude approximation of my name. "They forged it," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You forged my name to mortgage my own house? We had to, Nora yelled from the center of the room. Ethan's bistro was failing. We needed the capital. We were going to pay it off before you found out. It was a bridge loan. You committed identity theft against your own daughter, the officer said, shaking his head in disgust, to bail out your son. I looked at the crowd. I saw my Uncle Bob, who was wearing a Rolex I knew Thomas had given him for his 50th birthday. I saw my cousin Jessica, who had just returned from a gifted honeymoon in Bali paid for by Nora. Where do you think the money came from? I asked the room, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. The watches? The trips? The parties? You all thought Thomas was a brilliant investor. You thought Nora was a financial wizard. I pointed at the spreadsheet. It was me, I said. You were celebrating with my money. Every bottle of wine you drank tonight? I paid for it. Every gift under that tree? I paid for it. The roof over your heads right now? I paid for it. Uncle Bob looked down at his watch, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. The guests began to shift, realizing they were complicit in the looting of a young woman's inheritance. They were standing in a crime scene, drinking stolen wine. This is sick, someone muttered near the door. Let's go, another voice said. The herd mentality kicked in. The guests began to move toward the hallway, grabbing coats, abandoning half-empty glasses, desperate to distance themselves from the stench of the scandal. No, wait, Nora cried, struggling against the officer's grip. Don't leave. It is a misunderstanding. Have some dessert. We have a bûche de Noël. The absurdity of the offer, cake in the middle of an arrest, was the final nail in the coffin of her dignity. The officer keyed his radio. Dispatch. This is Unit 4. I have 2 subjects in custody at the Whitmore residence, requesting backup for transport. Possible 3rd subject pending investigation. He looked at Ethan. You can't take us, Thomas wailed, sinking to his knees. It is Christmas. You can't arrest people on Christmas. Crime doesn't take a holiday. Mr. Whitmore, the officer said coldly. Stand up. You are coming with us. He pulled Thomas up. My father looked small, without the bluster, without the facade of the wealthy provider. He was just a thief in a cashmere sweater. Nora, realizing the audience was leaving, turned her focus back to the one person she thought she could still manipulate. She turned to me. Her face was a ruin of mascara and sweat. She looked frantic, terrified, and desperate. Clara, she screamed, lunging forward until the handcuffs jerked her back. Clara, look at me. You can't let them do this. We are your family. We are all you have. I stared at her. I touched the cut on my lip where she had struck me less than an hour ago. You are destroying us, Nora sobbed, playing the victim one last time. How can you be so cruel? I am your mother. I raised you. I loved you when no one else would. You cannot do this to your own mother. The room went silent one last time. The few remaining guests in the hallway stopped to hear my answer. Meredith held her breath. I walked up to Nora. I stood just out of striking distance. Though with her hands cuffed, she couldn't hurt me anymore. I looked into her eyes, those blue, hard eyes that had terrorized me for 2 decades, and I saw nothing but a stranger. You are confused, Nora, I said. My voice was ice. It was the voice of the person who had survived her. What? She gasped, tears streaming down her face. You said I can't do this to my mother, I said, leaning in so she could hear every syllable. But my mother is dead. She died a long time ago. She is the woman whose will you buried. She is the woman whose money you stole. I straightened up and looked at Thomas, then back to Nora. You aren't my family, I said. You are just the people who signed the loan papers on my back. I turned to the officer. Get them out of my house, I said. Nora opened her mouth to scream again, but the officer spun her around and marched her toward the door. Thomas followed, weeping silently, flanked by the backup officers who had just arrived. Ethan was led out last, still clutching his phone, looking at the Porsche keys left behind on the bar, a symbol of the life he almost stole, now collecting dust. The door slammed shut, cutting off Nora's wailing. The house was suddenly quiet. The only sound was the wind howling outside and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I stood in the center of the ruins of the party. The floor was stained with scotch. The tree was still twinkling, oblivious to the tragedy. Meredith walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I looked around at the empty room. For the first time in 10 years. I didn't feel the crushing weight of their expectations. I didn't feel the phantom hands in my pockets. I didn't feel the dread of the next ask. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of pine and expensive perfume, but underneath, I could finally breathe. "I am fine," I said, and for the first time in my life, I meant it. I am finally debt-free. The spectacle of their exit was a grim parody of the holiday pageantry they had orchestrated. The front door of the estate, usually reserved for welcoming guests into the warmth of the foyer, now served as the stage for their disgrace. The flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers cut through the falling snow, painting the white lawn in violent, alternating strokes of color. Thomas was led out first. He was still wearing his cashmere sweater, the one he had received as a gift from a business associate he likely owed money to. His head was bowed, his shoulders slumped in a posture of utter defeat. He didn't look like the patriarch of a dynasty anymore. He looked like a man who had been caught trying to steal the communion wine. Nora followed, her silver gown dragging in the slush on the porch steps. She was still struggling, her voice shrill and desperate as she pleaded with the neighbors who had gathered on their driveways to watch. "Tell them," she screamed at Mrs. Gable across the street. "Tell them who we are. This is a mistake. Call my lawyer. Call someone." But Mrs. Gable just pulled her coat tighter around herself and turned away. The social capital Nora had spent 20 years accumulating, the dinners, the charity auctions, the carefully curated image of perfection, had evaporated the moment the handcuffs clicked. She was no longer the queen of the cul-de-sac. She was just another white-collar criminal being hauled away in the dark. Ethan brought up the rear, and his behavior was the most revealing of all. As the officer guided him toward the patrol car, he wasn't looking at his parents with concern. He wasn't asking where they were taking his mother. He was looking at the officer with wide, panicked eyes, the reality of a federal investigation crashing down on his fragile ego. "It wasn't my idea," Ethan shouted, his voice cracking. "You have to listen to me. I didn't want to do it. She made me." He jerked his head toward Nora. "She told me to use the login," Ethan babbled, confessing to everything in a frantic attempt to save himself. "She said Clara wouldn't notice. She gave me the password. I just clicked the button. I didn't know it was a crime. I thought it was family money. You can't arrest me for doing what my mother told me to do." Nora stopped struggling for a second. She turned her head, looking at her son, the golden boy she had pampered, protected, and prioritized over me for his entire life. She looked at him, selling her out without a second of hesitation. "Ethan?" she whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than any handcuff. "It is your fault!" Ethan yelled, tears streaming down his face as the officer pushed him into the back seat. "You said it was safe. You said we wouldn't get caught." The car door slammed shut, sealing his accusations inside. It was a poetic end to their dynamic. The monster Nora had created, the entitled, selfish, spineless man, had finally turned around and devoured her. I watched from the open doorway. The cold wind was biting, but I didn't feel it. I felt a strange, hollow lightness in my chest. "Clara," Meredith said gently, touching my arm, "you should leave. You shouldn't stay in this house. Come back to the hotel with me, or we can go to your place." I shook my head slowly. "Not yet. I need to finish this. I need to make sure it is documented." I turned back into the house. The hallway was empty now, save for Dana Holt and the lead officer, who was taking notes on a tablet. A few straggling relatives, cousins I barely knew, an aunt from Thomas's side, were huddled in the living room, whispering in hushed, frightened tones. I walked up to Dana. "I want a full report," I said. My voice was calm. devoid of the trembling that used to plague me in this house. I want the officer to document my injuries, the cut on my lip, the bruising on my arm, and I want a statement taken from everyone who heard Nora in the laundry room. We are doing that right now, Dana assured me. The officer needs to photograph the injuries for the assault charge. It will be the cornerstone of the restraining order we file tomorrow morning. I sat on the bench in the foyer, the same bench where I used to sit as a child waiting for Nora to tell me if I was allowed to eat dinner with the family or if I had to eat in the kitchen. The officer approached with a camera. "Turn your head to the left, please," he said. I turned. The flash blinded me for a second. "And the arm?" I pulled up the sleeve of my velvet dress. The red finger marks from Nora's grip were already darkening into bruises. They were ugly, violent marks on my pale skin, but as I looked at them, I didn't feel shame. I felt validation. They were proof. They were the receipt for the price I had paid to be free. "Thank you, Ms. Whitmore," the officer said. "We have enough. We will be in touch regarding the arraignment hearing. You will likely be called to testify." "I will be there," I said. "I won't miss it." The police left, taking the chaos with them. The house fell into a heavy, uncomfortable silence. I walked into the living room. The remaining family members looked up. They didn't know what to do. Should they apologize? Should they leave? They looked at me with a mix of shame, pity, and a new, grudging respect. They had seen me take the abuse for years, and they had done nothing. Now, they saw the woman who had burned the kingdom down, and they were afraid. "Clara," my Uncle Bob started, clearing his throat. We didn't know about the trust, about the house." "You didn't ask," I said simply. "You were happy to drink the wine and eat the food. You didn't care who paid for it." Bob looked down at his shoes. "I suppose we deserved that." "You should go," I said. "The party is over." They didn't argue. They grabbed their coats and scurried out the door like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty. It was just me, Meredith, and Dana. I walked through the silent house. It felt huge and empty, stripped of the false life Nora had pumped into it. I walked past the dining table where we had eaten so many tense meals. I walked past the fireplace where Thomas had posed for so many fake family photos. I stopped at the Christmas tree. It was still lit, the thousands of white lights casting a soft glow on the foil-wrapped gifts. The pyramid of presents was obscene in its excess. There were boxes from designer boutiques, electronics, jewelry. I knelt down and looked at the tags. To Ethan, love Mom. To Thomas, love Nora. To Nora, love Thomas. I searched for my name. I found it near the back, tucked behind a large box for Ethan. It was a small, flat package wrapped in generic paper. I picked it up. It weighed almost nothing. I tore the paper. Inside was a scarf, a synthetic blend, scratchy and cheap, in a color I hated. The tag was still on it. Clearance, $12. I stared at it. A $12 scarf for the daughter who had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep the roof over their heads. In the past, this would have crushed me. I would have gone to the bathroom and cried, wondering why I wasn't worth more to them. But tonight, I looked at the scarf and I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "It is perfect," I whispered. "It is exactly what I am worth to them. A clearance item." I dropped the scarf on the floor. I didn't want it. I didn't want anything from them ever again. "Clara?" I turned. Meredith was standing behind me, holding something in her hand. "I have something for you," she said. "Something that actually belongs to you." She held out her hand. Resting on her palm was a small brass key. It looked old, the metal tarnished with age. "What is this?" I asked. Taking it, it felt heavy and cold. "It is the key to a safety deposit box at the First National Bank downtown," Meredith said. "Your mother gave it to me the day she wrote that letter. She told me to keep it safe until you were strong enough to use it." "What is in the box?" I asked. "I don't know for sure," Meredith said. "Sarah never told me, but she said it was her insurance policy. She said it was the one thing Thomas didn't know about, the one thing Nora couldn't touch." I closed my fingers around the key. It felt solid. It felt real. "Why didn't you give it to me sooner?" I asked. "Because you weren't ready," Meredith said gently. "If I had given this to you 5 years ago, you might have told Thomas. You might have let Nora bully you into opening it for them. You needed to break the cycle first." She was right. I knew she was right. "Thank you," I said. "You have a lot of work ahead of you," Dana said, stepping forward. "The legal battle to recover the assets will be messy. Thomas will try to claim he acted in good faith. Nora will try to claim insanity or coercion. We have to audit every account, every transaction for the last 10 years. "I know," I said. "I am ready." "But tonight," Dana said, closing her briefcase. "The bleeding has stopped. The accounts are frozen. The house is secure. You did it, Clara." "We did it," I said. I looked around the room one last time. I wanted to remember this. I wanted to remember the silence. "I am going to check the back door," I said. "I want to make sure everything is locked up before we leave." I walked back through the kitchen. The ham was still sitting on the counter, cold and untouched. The oven was still warm. I pushed open the door to the laundry room. The air inside was still cold from where the garage door had been opened. The washing machine had finished its cycle and sat silent. I looked at the spot where Nora had pinned me against the cabinets. I looked at the floor where Thomas had dropped his glass. I looked at the shelf where the tiny camera was still hidden, its red light blinking every few seconds, capturing the empty room. It was just a room. It wasn't a torture chamber. It wasn't a prison. It was just a room with a washer and dryer and some cheap cabinets. I walked to the garage door, the door Meredith had come through. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped out onto the driveway. The night was quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a blanket of pristine, white snow that covered everything. The air was crisp and clean, scrubbing the smell of bleach and stale wine from my lungs. I stood on the asphalt, the cold seeping through the soles of my shoes, but I didn't mind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a call from Miles Carter. I answered. "Hello, Miles." "Clara." His voice was breathless. "I just got the confirmation from the bank. The fraud flag held. The transfer was blocked completely. Not a cent left your account. And because of the police report number Dana just texted me, the bank has initiated a full lockdown on all linked accounts. Your assets are untouched. You are safe." "Thank you, Miles," I said, "for everything." "Are you okay?" he asked. "Dana said it got physical." I touched my lip. The blood had dried. It needed to happen. It was the only way to make it stop. "Go home, Clara," Miles said. "Get some sleep. You are a free woman." I hung up. Another notification popped up on my screen, an automated email from the bank. Subject: Security alert. Resolved. Account status: secure. I stared at the word secure. For 30 years, I had been chasing security. I thought I could buy it by paying my father's bills. I thought I could earn it by being the perfect daughter. I thought if I just gave them enough, if I just took enough of their abuse, eventually I would be safe. But safety wasn't something they could give me. It was something I had to take. I looked back at the house. The lights were still on, blazing in the dark, a monument to a lie that had finally collapsed. I turned my back on it. I walked toward Meredith's car, which was idling at the bottom of the driveway. The exhaust plumed into the night air like white smoke. As I reached the car, I heard the distant sound of church bells ringing from the valley below. It was midnight. Christmas Day had arrived. I opened the car door and slid into the warmth of the passenger seat. Meredith looked over at me and smiled. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I said. I looked out the window as we pulled away. I saw the house receding in the rearview mirror, getting smaller and smaller until it was just a speck of light in the darkness. I touched the key in my pocket. I touched the phone with the secure status. "Merry Christmas, Clara," I whispered to myself. And for the first time in my life, the words didn't feel like an obligation. They felt like a promise. I wasn't the girl who paid the bills anymore. I wasn't the girl who signed the papers. I wasn't the girl who just took it. I was Clara Whitmore, and I had just taken back my life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I am always fascinated to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed seeing Clara finally get her justice, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, hit that like button, and give the video a hype so we can share this victory with even more people.